And we are live. What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fresh Air Podcast. We're here with General Flynn. Let's get into it, guys. Sorry for that delay. We had a little bit of technical issues. You guys know it always happens, right? We don't got Bills here. Man. We got Chris and we got Mo. So obviously, as you guys know, Bills is the best. But hey, Mo and Chris are able to make it work, man. So guys, welcome to the podcast. We have a legend in the house. We have General Flynn. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sir.
Oh my God,
I'm honored to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I know who you are. I watched your documentary, which all of you need to go watch it, by the way. It's on YouTube right now. Go check it out, guys. Go support. But for those that might not be familiar with who you are, can you please introduce yourself to the people?
Wow. So I am one of 9 children. I come from a long line of people that have served in the military, both my grandfathers, and all enlisted, with the exception of my 2 brothers. But my grandfather served in World War I. Both of them. One of those grandfathers served in World War I and World War II. My father served in World War II, served in the Korean War. I had a brother that served during the Vietnam era. Myself or my other brother, Charlie, who's still serving, and my son have all served in every single war since really the late 1970s. I grew up up in Rhode Island, state of Rhode Island. 9 brothers and sisters, a great family, great mother and father, tough Irish family. I decided to join the Army because that's what my father did, and my father retired as a master sergeant out of the Army. I went through public schools. I did go through a Catholic school at an early age, and I was a kid, sort of a product of the boys' club system. Used to do some swimming and boxing and stuff like that. Played
Avid
some pool.
surfer, right?
Avid surfer. I've been surfing for 55 years. Surfing, like wave surfing, on the ocean. I still own 10 surfboards. And so I decided to go in the Army. I went through the University of Rhode Island. I'm not a West Point guy. I just, figured I'd go in.
URI?
URI, yep, love it. Yeah, you're from up in Connecticut, that's right. And
you guys have a very good hockey team.
Yeah, great team. Great soccer at that time, too. But so I ended up going through ROTC. And which is the Reserve Officer Training Corps program. I wasn't sure if I was going to ever stay in long. But my first assignment was the 82nd Airborne Division. In the 82nd Airborne Division.
And what year was this when you got in there?
This was 1981 time frame. And so I spent more than half my career at Fort Bragg. Now they call it Fort Liberty, all this DEI stuff. So Fort Bragg. And I actually served there from the time I was a second lieutenant to a brigadier general. So I was in operational assignments, deployed a lot, deployed to Central America, deployed to the Middle East, deployed to East Africa, deployed to the Pacific in places like Korea and other places out in the Pacific, deployed to Central Asia. I have not only about almost 34 years in the Army, but I have 5 of those years are in combat. Direct combat with primarily with airborne and special operations units. I loved serving in the Army. I loved serving in the military. I spent, I always tell people they don't sprinkle fairy dust on you and poof, you're a general. You work your ass off to get there. And I can tell you, as a kid growing up, the way I grew up, we were we were taught to treat others like you like to be treated. My old man was a big, use the golden rule. My mother was, both of my parents are deceased now. My mother was, she was tough. Grew up in a tough family as well, and she was one to make sure you hit the books, and so we always did, And so I had a good life, blessed life. Decided to go in the military, and as I rose through the ranks, in the officer ranks from second lieutenant until I retired as the 3-star lieutenant general. My last military assignment was as the senior intelligence officer for the Department of Defense. So I was heading up an organization called the Defense Intelligence Agency. It's one of the largest intel agencies in the world, and I was blessed to be chosen for that, and we can talk about that. I think we should, because it's part of the film.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, and I also I had a couple of really critical jobs. I was the assistant director of national intelligence for the subtitle was for partner engagement, where I was responsible for all intelligence relationships internationally and domestically, specifically domestically for all federal, state, and local. So I traveled around the country quite a bit with a lot of the joint task forces that we have in our country. Mm-hmm. Your background with HSI, yeah. HSI, fits into some of those task forces for different things, different reasons. Certainly the investigation side. So I had a really great career. I spent a lot of time, a third of my career worrying about the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union and all that, and then the remainder. The next two big sections of my career, we were engaged in the Balkans, and then the Middle East started to draw us in. And then, of course, after 9/11, I got fully enmeshed in the war on counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, and that's when I went into the world of special operations and really tried to help to perfect the intelligence craft to be able to go after the enemies. Right? I mean, capturing and killing. That's what happens in war. Many of the most ruthless terrorists that we, at the time that I was serving, that we were facing around the world, and that was my mission. That was my mission as the head of intelligence for many, many people and many different types of organizations to go after some of these people, high-end guys. Like, you always hear a guy like a Trump saying, "We got al-Baghdadi, we killed him like a dog." Well, there was a lot of al-Baghdadis before him, before that guy, the head of ISIS at the time. We were going after the heads of Al-Qaeda. Bin Laden and Zarqawi were two of the big names. So I really was
KSM, these types of guys.
KSM,
that's called Sheikh Mohammed. Chat.
Yeah, exactly. Ansar al-Islam. I mean, all the things that happened in Libya. I mean, we can talk about that if you want, but maybe that's another time. But so I was really good at this warrior thing and being a good soldier, disciplined, and never worried about politics. I just worried about our mission, worried about the people that were part of my organizations. I led some of these organizations, and I was a key member, a key staff member, because the intelligence officer is right there in everything. I worked for presidents dating back to Jimmy Carter, so I've been around a while. And of course,
it's a lot of different administrations.
Yeah, and so definitely with the war on terror, so to speak, in these last 20 years, these last 25 years, I guess almost, where the Bush Cheney administration, I was deeply involved there, where we did a lot of briefings to them, for them, in support of them, and we can talk about that because I'm not a fan at all. And then, of course, the transition into the Obama administration, where he picked me, Barack Obama, and it comes out in the movie. And people can stream it from YouTube.
Please, guys, go check it out, man.
Yeah, it's called Flynn.
Go support.
Yeah, it's called Flynn, Deliver the Truth, whatever the cost. And I think it's like $3.99 or something. But and it helps me, believe me. It helps me to get out and about and do the things that I'm doing right now to help save this country. But Barack Obama chose me for two really critical assignments. One was as Assistant Director of National Intelligence, and the other was as the Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which I, just touched on both of those a second ago. And I was working with some of these, the likely suspects that we bring out in the movie, but also that we're dealing with right now, and certainly in the Trump administration early on we dealt with. So the names like Jim Clapper, Director of National Intelligence under Obama. John Brennan, Director of the CIA. Jim Comey, Director of the FBI. Sally Yates, who was the Deputy Attorney General for the United States for the Department of Justice, and then she became the Acting Attorney General during that transition between Obama and Trump. And then people like Susan Rice, just like I'm sitting with you, Myron, I sat with Susan Rice many times to do a transition, to do a turnover of the government from one national security advisor to another. Just as
it's not easy to do because it's an enormous amount of information that needs to get pushed over.
And you're talking about the United States of America. At the time, we're involved in all kinds of wars, and I always tell people that. And for your audience, because you got a different audience and a great audience actually. So as a general, as a guy in the Army, and I'm talking about all this military stuff, I'm actually very anti-war. I always tell people, I always sort of precisely more define that by saying I'm anti-stupid war. And we're involved in a lot of stupid wars right now. I mean, if somebody, comes up and punches you in the face like they did on 9/11, there should be a consequence to that. There should be an accounting for that. I mean, but I will say that since World War II, since the end of World War II, we have participated in a dozen wars, and we have not, and I use that word precisely, participate, we have not won since World War II. We've had some skirmishes and some battles like a Desert Shield, Desert Storm, where we, the 100-hour war, and that you look at what that got us, right? A mess.
Vietnam, Korean War, all these different random conflicts.
Korea, I mean, all these different, the Balkans, all these different places. So I always tell people, and I've written a book about this called The Field of Fight. People can go look that up. And I talk about war being the norm, and I'm sorry, I talk about peace being the norm.
Okay.
And I'm sorry.
You're fine. You're fine. So you talk about peace being the norm versus...
I actually talk about war being the norm.
Okay.
In the book, I talk about war being the norm, peace being the aberration. I apologize for mixing that up. But, the idea is that there's this establishment military-industrial complex that exists in Washington, D.C. President Eisenhower warned us about it. I talk about this in the film. And Eisenhower warned in his last speech to the United States after 8 years in the military, he sits there and warns us. The guy that ends up taking over from him, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who everybody's gotten to know, but JFK, he basically is going to take on this complex. That was one of his things, especially the CIA, and he ends up getting killed for it. So they assassinated him for it, and they feared him because he became president of the United States, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do, and they knew he was going to go after them.
A lot of people wanted him dead.
And so I talk about that in the film as well. I take the viewers back to the 60s and all the assassinations, both Kennedys, Martin Luther King. I show a shot of Malcolm X, and I talk about reassessing the and this is all. So we made this movie over a year ago, and it finally came out a few months ago, before these assassination attempts on Trump. And so in the movie, I address this business about assassinations because these are very real. Our government, I'll get screamed at for being, for disinformation, but I'm sorry. I mean, these are real things that people get involved in. And so I address this in the film, and then I take people through kind of where we are now. And I think where we are now, where we are right now, right here and now, as I sit here with you, Myron, we are in the throes of a takeover. And the battle that we are facing, and I can get into the spiritual, intellectual, emotional, physical, all those domains, but the real battle that we are facing is it's kind of a cognitive warfare, I call it. It's fifth-generation warfare. I've written a book on that as well. Citizen's Guide to 5GW, fifth-generation warfare. That's what we're involved in. So where information, resides and what you believe, who do you believe? That's why I'm here. I'm here because you have a great, honest, authentic approach to how you do your presentations in here and how you discuss and how you relate with your audience, your great audience. You got a beautiful audience, big audience. And I think that,
and a lot of them aren't aware of a lot of this stuff. A lot of younger guys, that are, trying to get laid or trying to make some more money, etc. But I think it's very important to understand geopolitical ramifications, understanding what's going on in politics, understanding this deep state, understanding how American politics works. And obviously, you know, we went through your career, obviously a very decorated military past. Real quick, because you mentioned that you had been all over the place. With South America, what were you doing over there in this, I'm assuming it's in the 80s probably, right?
Yeah.
Was it the counter-drug stuff?
Central America, yeah. Specifically from Panama up to Honduras for the, you know, and El Salvador, Nicaragua. So during that period of time, that was the, you know, Sandinistas and
Iran-Contra, right?
Yeah, Iran-Contra. At the time, I wasn't aware of Iran-Contra because I was a younger officer, but I was physically on the ground.
Can you tell the audience real quick what that was?
Iran-Contra was really, it's kind of like what we've heard, you know, sort of weapons for drugs and then moving weapons from different organizations in Central America, and then how the Iran played in. So there was a big connection between the forces and the insurgents in Central America to defeat one communist element, and then the sort of the drugs for arms trade that was going on. And, you know, that's where like Ollie North, for those that even remember, you know, Ollie, I do, and I've met him, and I actually think he's a good man. He was brought up, you know, he was sort of sucked into it all as a member of the National Security Council, working under the President Reagan administration. So it was a you know, drugs for arms, arms for drugs, and there was a relationship between different factions, our government, the Iranian government at the time, and others who were in the market and black market of moving arms, and then bringing CIA, big part of it, and then bringing drugs back into the United States.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah, there's some great movies that are about that, you know, but that people can go watch. But what I would tell you, and I want
so you were just a foot soldier on the ground at that point.
I was a foot soldier. I was a platoon leader initially, and then I became a staff officer where we were planning operations. I mean, we're planning things like you know, coups. We're planning to take over countries. But my early time, I was a platoon leader in the 82nd Airborne Division, put on the ground in Honduras, in eastern Honduras, in a place called Puerto Limpira. And the name of the exercise was Aguas Tara, which means, I think, pine tree. And we were way, way over on the eastern shore, and then we tucked ourselves into the border. And so we were doing border operations at that time, and that was...
were you guys targeting, like, narco traffickers?
Yeah, narco, but we were also doing collection missions. We were doing reconnaissance and surveillance-type missions. And also, you know, at that time we called it electronic warfare, signals intelligence collection. So we were there actually doing intelligence operations along the border to help the CIA and, you know, our government gather evidence and gather information on the Sandinistas. It was a fascinating time for me. The guys that I had in my platoon, I think this is a great story. That, you know, my platoon sergeants, I was a platoon leader, young first lieutenant at the time.
And just for the audience, can you tell them, like, a platoon, how many guys were you in charge of?
I had at the time, I think I had we had about 50 guys that I took down there. All Spanish speakers. You know, my Spanish at that time was not bad. Now it's, you know, poquito, right? It's very, very little. But I had a lot of Spanish speakers at the time. My platoon sergeant was a great guy. He actually worked out of Miami when he was a younger sergeant when the Mariel boat lift. He was an interrogator. So he was drafted by the agency to go work, drafted out of the Army, went and worked there. So really tough guy. He's from Oxnard, California. I don't know if you got anybody from Oxnard, California, but Oxnard, California is a tough place out there in L.A. And he was a Mexican, really good guy. Zamora was his name. And then we had a whole bunch of other guys from New York. We had guys from Puerto Rico. We had guys from here, from South Florida.
Okay, yeah.
That were part of my platoon, part of the 82nd Airborne Division. Tough guys. I mean, just good men. And so we ended up going down there. We stayed there for a couple of months on the ground. We did some really great work, and that was my introduction into a deployment that was, you know, that was sort of it sort of crossed between, sort of a peace type, peacekeeping type mission. Although we were, I'm not sure we were keeping any peace, and combat operations because of where we were operating on the border, literally on the border, and setting up the kinds of things that we set up for collection. And we also had aviation operations that were part of it. We had a security force that was part of it. So it was a fascinating introduction for me, because from that point, I was also involved in Grenada. So people that will forget about, Grenada was another thing. Most people, maybe most of your audience, weren't even born then, but I went to, deployed to Grenada, as Mo understand. I went to Grenada. Yeah, I went to Grenada as a platoon leader, and that was where the Cubans had taken over Grenada, the island of Grenada, the Spice Isle. It's all the way down at the tip of the Caribbean, and you go. I mean, I'm a good swimmer. I wouldn't say I could swim from Grenada to Venezuela, but that's the path, right?
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So Cubans had occupied Grenada. There was a decision that we were going to go down there and take them out of there, which we did. I was part of that task force. I was also a platoon leader for that operation, and I took that same platoon of guys back to Grenada, and we set up a whole bunch of things until.
This was also in the 80s as well?
This was in the 80s, yeah. And we actually fought the Cubans at that point in time. Some good friends of mine got wounded, and that was really the first exposure for me, where I came off of the plane when we came in to the airfield, and that was the first time that I had actually seen our guys in body bags.
Oh, wow.
Being backloaded. So we're coming off, and those were the original group that was killed, and those guys were the Rangers that had jumped in to the airfield about 24 hours prior, and there was about 10 of them that had died, and they were sitting in, laying in body bags, and
they were killed in action from the opposition.
Killed in action by the Cubans, taking over that airfield.
Because they got in, you said 24 hours prior. They went in before you guys to do reconnaissance.
Yep, to get in to secure the airfield so we could bring in follow-on aircraft, and that's what their job is. Ours is as well. Ours was as well, but their decision was made to put the Rangers in first, and they did an amazing job. Obviously, tragically, they lost some guys. And
was that your first instance where you saw dead soldiers?
Yeah, and from combat.
From combat.
Okay. I had training experiences. It's tough. In the military, you do a lot of things that are that are in training. You just do a lot of things. You do live fires. You're getting on helicopters. You're jumping out of airplanes. But that was the first time when it was like an enemy was now there to try to oppose you and kill you, and they had successfully killed a few, and we ended up getting them out of that island.
Would you say the military strategy, and I kind of want to bring this full circle, for the United States back in the 80s was counter-drug, counter-communism, let's keep this stuff at bay, collect information on these guys, they're too close to home, we need to figure out what they're doing, what they're planning, are they using drugs to fund their communist beliefs?
Right.
Was that kind of what it was?
Yes, absolutely. So remember back in the 80s, and again, kind of to bring this full circle to now, because a lot of things have flipped on its head.
Yeah.
So then it was, the West, which was primarily America, our partners in Europe, Australia, some partners out in the Pacific like the Republic of Korea, South Korea, Japan, and versus the Warsaw Pact, right, which was all of Eastern Europe, from East Germany all the way, to Moscow, right? So that was the Warsaw Pact. So that was kind of the big competition. And what we were doing in our hemisphere was we were stopping the rise of communism in our hemisphere. So the Reagan Doctrine, what they called it, the Reagan Doctrine was to prevent wherever communism raised its head, Reagan's intent was to stop it. So whether it was in the Caribbean, whether it was in Central America, or whether it was in down in South America. And a lot of times we were directly involved. The United States was directly involved in helping to overthrow governments in South America that were communist, and certainly in Central America, because it and as I just mentioned, Grenada, and there were other places. The Dominican Republic is another place, and that's all changed. So communism was prevalent in that part of the world when Reagan came into office, and his goal for his period of time was essentially to crush communism in our hemisphere and turn these countries over to where people are voting, right? Democratic nations. And, so people will know like Milei in Argentina today, right? So Argentina was one of those countries that was stronghold communist for over 100 years. And Milei is really the first president. I'm a big fan of his. I think what he's doing is amazing. So Milei's the first president in Argentina in over 100 years. So that was one of the really tough nuts to crack, was Argentina, and we never could. And the people of Argentina finally figured it out, and they said enough is enough. We're going to get rid of these communist thugs. Brazil, on the other hand, has flipped around. Where, remember Bolsonaro in Brazil, and now Lula took over from Bolsonaro in a contested election. Call it what you want. Was it fraudulent? Who knows? Just like our own election in 2020, which I believe was fraudulent. But now you have a communist a government in Brazil.
Yeah.
And
they banned Twitter there too.
Yeah, and Bolsonaro, who's a good guy, they banned Twitter. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, Bolsonaro's a good guy, was bringing in back in democracy and opening it up to the rest of the world, opening it up to capitalism and basically in freedom. They're actually talking about arresting him now. I saw that about a month ago, and I sort of lost a bubble on that. But I've been in touch with people in senior leaders and serious leaders in South America who are still in these democratic stronghold nations, and one of the things that they're looking forward to is if we could get our country back, because to bring this thing full circle, we're now kind of flipped on its head, where we had a country of political people that were always fighting communists. The communist infiltration into the United States government, and this is real. You don't want to believe me, fine, but trust me, what I say is what I believe, and it's because it's not only long experience, but I have this is my life. National security of this country is my life. This is what I've been doing. I get up in the morning early and I read executive orders, or I read planning documents. And I'm a big athlete. I love sports. But I spend most of my time thinking about the direction that the United States is taking. And now 30, 40 years later, right, we are now transitioning to essentially a socialist form of government. So
we're becoming exactly what we tried to prevent back in the 80s.
Exactly. And what happens is the people that we continue to vote for, and this is why for your audience it's really, I want your audience to understand how important voting is. I mean, God, we've had, hundreds of thousands of men and, primarily young men and women, primarily young men who have given their lives for this country over so many, 2.5 centuries, right? To give us a right to vote. And man, so don't take your vote lightly. Don't think that your vote doesn't count. Your vote counts. Voting matters. I say, if we want to make America great again and we want to make America healthy again, we got to make America vote again. And so you got to get out there and vote. And so, I want people to understand that we are now facing a socialist takeover. And to take it back to the film, the specific date that I can point to, and I talk about it in the film, is the 5th of January of 2017, 5 January 2017, in the Oval Office, a meeting led by Barrack Obama, and during that meeting, and I talk about this in detail in the film. During that meeting, they talked about they had to get rid of Flynn in order to get rid of Trump. I mean, that almost verbatim. Okay, and we've proven that out in court filings and my dismissal. But most people think I spent a couple of years in jail. I didn't spend any time in jail. I did plead guilty. You learn about it in the film. Why? Because I.
Speaking of Obama, let's go. So we talked about the 80s. We obviously fighting communism, which ironically enough now we are becoming what we fought against in the 80s. 90s, right? We get into the Middle Eastern affairs with Desert Storm, etc. Then obviously the early 2000s. We could go ahead of
9/11.
Yeah, and you spent before we get into Obama, because I wanted to ask you this, and I really want to bring attention to this for the audience too. You're one of the few people that were operational at a high level in the military.
Yep.
You weren't one of these guys that were going back and forth between D.C., doing the tours, etc. You were actually out there on the ground, running operations, being operational in combat, real time in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And to that, I want to say thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I want the people to know that, like, what you really did. You were out here really doing shit. You didn't just get appointed these positions by Obama and Trump just because. There's meritocracy here. Can you talk about what things you did?
Yeah, that's a great word, too, meritocracy, because we've lost that. So, I appreciate this because I didn't go to Washington, D.C. until I was a 2-star. So that's for a lot of generals and admirals, you float in and out of Washington, D.C. over a career. You go up there and you kiss the ring. And I just never liked that. I wasn't like that. So I liked the 82nd Airborne Division. I liked Special Operations Forces. I liked 18th Airborne Corps. I liked jumping out of planes. I liked deploying. I thrived on it, and maybe I'm designed that way. Like I said early on in this show, I'm one of 9 kids. I grew up in a family that was a tough family, no excuses, and you go serve your country. That was my father's thing, and so my thing was to go serve my country. And I always, whenever I met somebody that came out of Washington, because they always come down and visit you, they loved visiting us. They would come in and there would be all kinds of security that would have to be provided for these people coming in for like 2 days. We're
when
out
they'd
there.
Come to Iraq or Afghanistan,
when they'd come
right?
to visit anywhere, in any of these places I've been, they'd show up. There'd be a ton of security around them. They'd come out and they'd take a couple of photos and then they'd head back home. I couldn't stand those types of people, frankly. I mean, I know that we need them, I guess, but I liked being around soldiers. I liked being in the field. I thrived on it, and I was good at it. I was very good at it. And like I said, you don't get to the level that I'm at. I mean, some guys you could say, well, if you hang around Washington D.C. enough, you're going to get promoted up to the ladder. It was not something that I was wanting. I actually thought when I first joined the military that I was going to get out after my initial tour, but because I went to the 82nd Airborne Division, I found something that I thought was missing in my life, and the camaraderie, the people, the sergeants, the corporals, the privates that I was around, I absolutely loved them, and they were very competitive. I'm a very competitive person, and no matter what we did it really well. The units that I've been in, and anybody that's ever served with me, and that's the thing. Like all this craziness that I was the most Googled name in the world for 2 years. During the time that I was persecuted. That's amazing. I've been called every name in the book. But it's really hard to find, and they never really have, It's really hard to find somebody that I serve with or that served with me, that we served together, that would sit there and go, oh, Flynn's an asshole. He's, he's this, he's that. Or he's an ass kisser or something like that. You won't find that because I wasn't. And I'm not going to, I'm patting myself on the back, which is rare.
Well, you led a bunch of, obviously operations that led to the capture and or assassinations of, high-level targets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Zarqawi.
Can you talk about some of the ones that you did?
Yeah, so, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was probably 3 years we hunted him in Iraq. He was worse than bin Laden, deadly, really, really incredibly. I mean, so there was a video early on in 2000 and probably 2004 timeframe, 4 guys in masks with a guy by the name of Nick Berg, sad. And Zarqawi was the one that had him by his crop of the top of his hair, and in the video proceeded to cut his head off. Young kid that just got lost,
Was he a journalist or Nick Berg?
He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and
kidnapped him and
and then they made a video, and they
huge in the early 2000s,
unbelievable, 2004 time frame, and so those 4 individuals, just to give you an example, the organization that we were a part of, we had a mission to destroy Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and frankly, and the other element that we had was to destroy Al-Qaeda in the Afghanistan-Pakistan area of operations. But this particular one was in Iraq, and Zarqawi was the leader. And
head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, flowing foreign fighters from Morocco to Egypt, into Iraq. It was an incredible period of time, 2004 to 2007. We ended up killing Zarqawi in June of 2006.
How'd you guys find him?
It took us years. You were HSI, and you know what an investigation entails. And so we did police work, we did military intelligence work. I had at the time We did interrogations of prisoners that we captured, and we would capture guys just to get information. We would go after their communications. We would go after their thumb drives, their phones. We wanted anything that we could to investigate where this guy and how he operated. And that's a show in itself to actually talk about the particular operation the night we killed him, because we ran 36 operations. The night we killed him, that night we ran 36 raids, combat raids that night. It was
simultaneously in different locations, right? To try to find him.
Well, we killed him, and we wanted to break apart this network. So, but that Nick Berg video was something that struck me and other guys in our team, and we committed to not only making Zarqawi our number one target to go after, because he was part of that video, but we wanted to get all 4 guys. So that did that, because this was a brutal way that they were trying to psyop us and to try to put fear into U.S. soldiers, and it probably
very common in the early 2000s where they would have these beheading videos. For my younger guys out there, there'd be a website, it was like orgrish.com or whatever, and they'd have all these like really grotesque murders of servicemen, American citizens.
And I watched a lot of them because I wanted to, I had to understand the behavior of these people, and so that was my world, and I did, and it was disgusting, but in order to understand the culture and the mindset, so the bottom line of those 4 is all of them were either captured or killed. So we made it a point to go after every single one of them, to hold them to account for what they did to that young man who did not deserve that. And to this day, I get emotional thinking about it, because that was really one of the first. It wasn't the first beheading that I had seen on a video. That I've seen some other really gruesome things, and we've captured people or killed people that this is what they do. I mean, these are savages. I mean, these are savages that do that kind of thing, So Zarqawi was a big operation. Once we killed him, then and I knew because we talked about it that night. We actually had a call with the president of the United States of America at the time was George Bush. He actually called. I was in the room. Back at our headquarters, when I say in our headquarters, it was a plywood set of boxes that we were operating inside of a hangar, so it wasn't like headquarters, right?
Yeah.
And Bush called us up to thank us, and one of the things that I remember us telling him was that, yep, we feel good that this is a mission that we accomplished, but this thing is far from over. And here we are. Here we are today.
Yeah.
With the Middle East is still
20 years later almost.
That's why I say peace is the aberration and war is the norm in human history. And man,
looking back, before we get into the Obama, because I got some questions about the Obama administration next. Looking back, do you think we should have went to Iraq?
No, we should have not gone to Iraq. Iraq was probably the biggest strategic failure so far. I think in the 21st century. Now we're into the 3rd decade of the 21st century. I absolutely think, and I believe strongly, with good evidence, and I can talk to you all day about this, that it was a massive, massive failure in decision making at the highest levels of the U.S. government, and of course that's George Bush, the president at the time, Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, Cheney, and there were others. Huge mistake for us to go into Iraq. We could have easily just sanctioned the crap out of Saddam. Hell, if they wanted to go in there and assassinate him, they could have assassinated him, but it wouldn't have gotten anybody better. But big mistake. We could have contained Saddam, easily contained Saddam. I mean, hell, this audience, so you know, for 8 years we supported Iraq and their war against Iran.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy the back and forth. So huge failure in decision making at the highest
levels. Saddam was an ally at one point, and we don't like to talk about that, but he was.
No, we don't. And I think it was just a vendetta on the part, and that's me, and that's what I believe. It was a bit of a vendetta on the part of the Bush administration,
Well, I'll tell you what, I take your opinion way more serious than everyone else because you were there on the ground.
Yeah, and
unlike these other neocons that wrote the policy and all this other shit.
Yeah, and they talk about nuclear weapons and all this bullshit. I mean, it's, our government constantly lies to us, and so as I got further and further on in my career and more senior, so what your audience is hearing from me and the way I talk right now, this is how I am. So like it or not, I mean, this is kind of how I am.
No, they love you. Don't worry.
Well, I
see in the chat right now.
So I'm very blunt. I treat people really well. I mean, I always will treat people really well because I appreciate honesty, and I appreciate, like if you sit around in a big table. I mean, I've had jobs, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I'd have a staff meeting, and my staff would be like 25 people, right, all sitting around a big oak table, right. I mean, it's a headquarters in Washington D.C., and I would cherish those backbenchers when I would say, okay, we're about to make a big decision here. Is this what we want to do to everybody? And of course, you just kind of know who the ass kissers are. But then some little young, government servant in the back row would raise their hand and go, well, sir, I think this is pretty stupid. And I'd be like, oh my God, I want to hug that person. Mm-hmm. Because that's what you want. It's for any of you that grew up, and I grew up, with the story of the emperor has no clothes, right? And the emperor's riding through town on the back of a horse with no clothes on, and it finally gets to the end, and some little kid says, hey, man, you don't got any clothes on. And the emperor gets embarrassed, right? Because nobody else wanted to tell the emperor they didn't have any clothes on. And that's what happens when you get higher and higher and more senior in rank, is you have all these people around you that want to tell you what they think you want to know, and instead of telling you what you need to know. And that's the way I am. So I want people to be like that around me. And I am that way around others. When I don't get enamored by rank or position. I'm not enamored by presidents of the United States. I'm not enamored by kings or princes or prime ministers. I've been in the company of many of those types of those titles. I have some who are friends.
Do you think? So we talked about Iraq. Do you think we needed to also go into Afghanistan, or do you think that was also a colossal failure as well?
So
and the way we pulled out, if you could comment on that as well, what your opinion is on that?
Yeah, so for those, so we went into Afghanistan with the right intentions, but the wrong, and this is a little bit of quarterback, and I'm Monday morning quarterbacking here a bit, so people understand that. The Monday morning quarterbacking is that, when I look back at it, because I was in Afghanistan, God, I used to say I lived in Iraq and I vacationed in Afghanistan. I was over there for almost 3.5 years straight.
Was this after you? So you guys got rid of Zarqawi and then Afghanistan was the next?
I was in Afghanistan before Zarqawi even came on the scene. So I had been deployed to Afghanistan early
Gotcha.
on. So we went into Afghanistan with the right intentions, but the wrong.
What year did you get there?
The first time I was in Afghanistan was early 2002.
Oh wow!
So
before even the Iraqi invasion.
Oh yeah. Before Iraq was even, they were starting to think about it. We knew that, and that was a big mistake, like I said. But so we should have gotten out of Afghanistan when we put Karzai, President Karzai, in charge the first time in June of 2004 time frame.
And the reason we went is because at the time there was information that Bin Laden was in Afghanistan, right? Right. That was the main reason we went there.
The main rean he was there,
and then he was in Pakistan.
And then he absconded to he probably there's some great books out there and speculation. The Iranians probably protected him for a little while, and then he moved into Pakistan. There's a lot. I mean, when that whole story comes out, and if you really dig in bits and pieces, it's so ugly. From a U.S. intelligence community perspective, how the failures, and folks, what I'm telling you is we do have good people in our country, in parts of our government, but the culture of some of these organizations at the very top is where it really gets set up, gets set in, right?
I agree, yeah.
It's just terrible. So we should have gotten out of Afghanistan really after we put Karzai in charge the first time. And when he was in charge, we should have downsized. And this is hindsight, right? Because at the time, the first time I was there, I was a colonel, and I was asked the question, by some media. I did a media interview there in Bagram, and it was early. It was very early on. It was probably like May of 2002. And I was asked to, we have some media that showed up. They brought him in a plane. Can you go talk to him? And I did. And I was asked, well, how many enemy are we facing here? We've been told that there's only a few enemy left in Afghanistan, that everybody's out, everybody's been killed or captured or whatever. And I said, at the time, this was like May, I said, well, yeah, and I knew the numbers that we had, captured or killed at the time, and it was small numbers. And I said, yeah, there might be, we may be facing 10,000, spread across the southern and eastern part of Afghanistan. But I said, but there's 500, and I went just like this, just like I'm pointing right now to the media. I said, there's 500,000 of them across the border in Pakistan, and that's going to be our problem. And I remember specifically giving a presentation to some leadership that came out of Washington, D.C., who told us, don't start building things here, because we're not going to be here for a long time. And I was like looking at them, and I'm looking at them. This is 2002, early. And we were like, are you kidding me? That never happens like that. And I told them that the greatest threat that we're going to face is information, and the information operations that these people are so good at, because Afghanistan, is they call it the graveyard of empires, right? The British Empire, the Soviet Empire, and now the American Empire. So you asked me about the retreat. Really, I call it the retreat from Afghanistan. When we left, we retreated. We retreated under enemy fire. We left Americans behind enemy lines. We had people that were unnecessarily killed. The brave 13 that were at that gate that day, and we lost, wounded a couple of hundred from that explosion. And everybody saw the C-17 taking off from Kabul International Airfield with the guy hanging off the friggin' you saw it, right?
Yeah,
it's nuts. I mean, that should never have happened. It should never have happened. We are much better than that as a military. And for our military leaders, the 4 stars, the 2 stars, the generals, the admirals that were in charge of that mess, they ought to all be. They should resign if they're not already resigned, and they should. I'm not going to sit here and say that they should be court-martialed, but they should, because they're following the orders of their civilian masters, and the orders were just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
So we could have left in a much calmer, in a much more organized manner. People have died and are seriously wounded because of the complete debacle caused by. Frankly, caused by a guy who has dementia. I hate to say it.
Yeah,
I mean, I call him Uncle Joe because he's, my Uncle Joe, who I had, he'd be in bed by 4.
Yeah.
I mean, we're lucky if Joe makes it to 4.
Yeah.
I mean, and I want people to understand that his behavior didn't just happen like this, last week. I mean, this has been going on since he became president of the United States. So I want people to understand that this is the presidency of the United States of America. This is the person that's supposed to be responsible for being the leader of this country, the free world. And his number one priority, the number one priority of the U.S. government is to protect the safety and security of the American people, period. Mm-hmm. Everything else is secondary. Whether or not we, spend billions of dollars in Ukraine or billions of dollars in the Middle East or going elsewhere around the world, the number one priority is to provide for the safety and protection of the people of the United States of America, period. And here we are with this maddening, invasion that's going on. I mean, fentanyl, and I know you got fentanyl problems, and we're here in your studio in Miami here.
Yeah.
And, we got, the border situation is not, is just at the border. And the illegal invasion is not just at the border. I was just up in your home state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
In Middletown, we were doing some anti-child trafficking. We had a seminar up there this past weekend. Great seminar.
Nice.
We had some great cops that showed up to help us that are involved.
Was the HSI there?
Huh?
Was the HSI there?
HSI was not, but we had local sheriff and a local local chief police department out of Middletown, Connecticut. Great. But I tell you that because the invasion of our country right now is not just down in Texas or New Mexico or California, Arizona. It's all over the country. Fentanyl. Yeah. We have over 200,000. I say killed.
Worst drug ever.
I say killed in action. Oh, and then and what they're doing, because it's here too. It's right here in this city. What they're doing is in the past year, they've added a little bit more horse tranquilizer to the ingredients, so it's really powerful. Mm-hmm. And so I call it killed in action because that's a military term for somebody who dies on the battlefield. So the battlefield of America right now on our streets, we have over 200,000 killed in action, and we have hundreds of thousands wounded in action, another military term, wounded in action. So buy fentanyl. Fentanyl is a Chinese designed and made and then introduced through the drug cartels of Mexico, and then they work with their counterparts in various criminal cartels here in the country, whether it's MS-13 or Russian cartels or Chinese cartels that are here on the streets of America all over. I mean, this isn't just Eagle Pass, Texas. This is, or Juarez.
Eagle Pass.
This is not any. This is right everywhere in this country. So,
fentanyl is a serious problem.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you this. It's October 7th, right? And obviously, this is the 1-year anniversary of the what went down in Israel between Hamas and everything else like that, and it's led to a regional conflict with Israel invading Lebanon and everything else like that. You're an expert in Middle Eastern affairs. You've spent a significant amount of your time.
Countries.
Yeah, you spent a significant amount of time there. You understand the geopolitical nature and climate over there. What do you think is going to happen next, given the Israeli invasion, Iran sending missiles over? What do you think is going to happen in your prediction?
In warfare, we have something called wargaming. And so if you wargame out this question, which is a great question, and I'm not sure that it's being done to the degree that I would impose on our Department of Defense, but you have an action, a reaction, and a counteraction. So if I say I'm going to do this, what are the reactions that you might do, right? So you go back and forth with these scenarios, right? So your reaction is going to be X, right? It's like it's like we're in football season right now. So I do a down and out, I do a sweep to the right or left, right? So the reaction by the linebackers is to shift, the deep backs is to shift. That's the reaction. And then I have a counteraction where I go and I fake to the right and I go deep to the left.
Good analogy.
So I mean that's war
That's so true, though.
It's so true. So right now, as I war game out what's happening in the Middle East, I gave you that sort of analogy because I want people to understand how I think and how those of us who are in this world of warfare, which I have a master's degree in, both physically because I've experienced it, but also I have a master's degree in it. So anyway. When I war game out what's going to happen in the Middle East, Israel right now is not fighting to win. Israel is fighting to survive. That's a completely different chemistry. It's a completely different mindset. So in order to survive, because they're kind of in this bastion all by themselves, right? They're in this cauldron all by themselves. Iran is clearly at they're the sort of the leader of these various groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. Houthis just fired another missile in the last 24, in the last 12 hours. They fired another giant missile. I mean, so these are, even though they did some destruction, even though Israel targeted the Houthis. So I think right now what we're looking at is a much bigger war that is going. I mean, if it can get bigger, right? But yes, it can. And I think that we're looking at some type of action by Israel into Iran. They are going to have to do that because the Iranian government is not going to stop, and they're not going to give in. And so they're almost calling them out. So if that's the action by Israel into Iran, then what is the reaction, right? Like the football analogy, what's the reaction of the Iranians back into Israel? Do they launch another 400 or 500 missiles, right? And then what's Israel's counteraction? Because I just said, and I want people to take this one away, this is about survival for Israel and the state of Israel.
That's a really good point that you mentioned, because if you look at their escalations, whether it was the pagers exploding, invading Lebanon, the amount of strikes they've done into Beirut, into Hamas, into Gaza, I guess that's a good way to put it, because they've been escalating at an unprecedented level.
Yeah. So you have that. So the counteraction then could be, the use of even higher end weapon systems. And now we're getting into the world of, the word of nuclear, right? And we already have the discussion of nuclear weapons in Eastern Europe. So Russia has recently changed its policy. I don't know what that policy is. I used to know what their policy was, but they've in the last 2 months they've changed their policy. The Secretary General for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has talked about the use of nuclear weapons. Biden mentioned the use of nuclear weapons. This is crazy. It's total madness. And
Scary.
it is very, and because people start to go, well, they're going to use the use of tactical nuclear weapons. There's no such thing. Now the military guys and you're going to hear political people go, well, it's tactical nukes. Tactical nukes have more devastation than the atomic bombs that we dropped, plural, that we dropped on Japan during World War II to end the fight, at least in the Pacific. So we're in a really very, very dangerous time, and it's leading into a very important, the most historically consequential election in our nation's history, because if we don't get this one right, we go down the path of socialism, where we become the United Socialist States of America, America with socialist characteristics instead of the United States of America, which is, what I think all these people out here in the beautiful streets of Miami and elsewhere around this country want to continue to have all these freedoms. We will lose them. We will lose them quickly. And so the wars are, these wars can clearly be ended. They can be ended by really strong leadership that emanates out of the White House. And right now, sorry, but we don't have it. We don't have it in the president. We don't have it in the vice president. We don't have it in the various departments. Our Secretary of State, our Secretary of Defense. I mean, when I see them operating around the world, I'm like, oh my God, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing because we need calm, measured, smart, and then shrewd and savvy. I mean, it's like playing cards. I said early on in this interview that I grew up in the boys' club system, right? And you would go there. I'd go there with like nothing in my pocket, and I'd walk out with $5. And this is back in like the late 60s and early 70s as a kid, because I get dropped off, or I'd walk there after school, So, you learn to play cards, right? You learn how to do different things. I learned how to play chess. I learned how to play games, play pool, right? And I didn't like to lose. So right now, it's not about...
Do you think we're closer to World War III than we've ever been?
We are in World War III. Okay, we are in World War III because the components of warfare are not always these things that you see on TV, right? Like these war movies, these war flicks, right? It's not like, we're in World War III right now. So we have a war going on domestically in this country, frankly, between the people of this country right now. Yeah. I mean, we talked about fentanyl. We talked about, the drug cartels. We talked about Chinese influence in not only the drug trade, but also the political behavior of our country. We've talked about the physical wars that we are clearly involved in the Middle East. We are clearly involved in Europe. We're providing them not only hundreds of billions of dollars, both places, both those locations, but
Israel and Ukraine,
all kinds of weapon systems. Hell, the American taxpayer is paying for the entire war in the Middle East. We're giving billions of dollars to Iran. Iran is taking that money, giving it to Hezbollah, giving it to Hamas, giving it to the Houthis. And then we're also giving money to Israel.
Because we unfroze their billions, didn't we? Biden unfroze their money.
We unfroze them. We gave them tons of money. So, for your audience and the American people, I mean, this is why we've got to stop this incompetence, and frankly, this behavior in our current leadership. And I'm not just talking about who's in the White House. I mean, this is the whole of government, right? These are Republicans, Democrats. These are the people that are running our country right now. They're running it into the ground. The fact of life, folks, is that in the history of the world, there are what they call empires, right? Go back to the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire.
I have a hypothetical for you after.
Yeah. So the fact of life is that all empires at some point in time collapse. And, and I hope and I pray that we are not at the end of our thread here. So anyway, I do want to, but I know we're gonna run a little bit here with time, but because whatever question you got, Myron, I
got like one or two more.
I do want to talk about the disasters in North Carolina because I want to bring some awareness to that for the folks.
Go ahead, I'll ask you my question after.
So just briefly, I mean, because I'm involved with different people and different organizations helping out the situation up in North Carolina. This is the Hurricane Helene, which hit North Carolina, a hurricane, right? Amazing. It is probably going to turn out to be the biggest disaster that the U.S. has ever faced. We did have a disaster in the early 1900s that killed about 10,000 down in the Texas area. I think this could surpass it. I don't think we have the numbers in yet. I know that we're close to 2,000 dead so far, and it's going to go up. So I want to keep people focused on our government is putting stuff over in the Middle East. You got Harris, praising the money that we just sent over to the Middle East and over to Europe, to Eastern Europe, and we've got people that are literally dying, and now we're recovering bodies towns that were completely washed out. One of my grandfathers comes from Eastern Tennessee, the Newport, Tennessee area, and that area out there has been devastated. We are about to get hit with a major hurricane in Florida here.
Yeah.
It looks like a Cat 4 at least. Some it could get up to Cat 5. I was here for Hurricane Ian.
That was bad.
I want people to know that when Katrina hit, because Bush got a lot of grief for Katrina in New Orleans, right? I've given Bush a lot of grief just for a lot of things, particularly I mentioned Iran or Iraq. But we deployed for Katrina, 75,000 military almost immediately. Like within 4 days, we had 75,000 military on the ground. Right now, the numbers of military on the ground in North Carolina is like around 2,000 maybe.
Oh, what the
and
fuck?
There's more private organizations. I'm on a call every morning and every night with updates, and we're moving everything. We're moving everything from hygiene products, medical supplies, generators. The mountains up there right now at nighttime, they drop down into the low 30s. There's it's not raining up there right now, but it's every night it's freezing. And so there's people up there with nothing. They lost everything.
$750, but we go ahead and get billions.
Unbelievable. So I want to just,
right?
I just wanted to give a shout out. And if people follow me at Gen Flynn, my pinned account right now, I have an organization that I do work with. It's called Citizens Defending Freedom. And if people want to donate to that, we just on my drive down here this morning, we were able to raise $200,000.
Nice.
That money matters, and trust me, that the money that goes into that account is going directly to support, whether it's to buy food or supplies, pay for gas, pay for generators, pay for sleeping bags.
That's
everything.
where tax dollars should be going there, not to
exactly.
billions of dollars in foreign aid.
We're having to do this when we're paying billions of dollars overseas. This is insane. So
fucking wild.
It is.
Let me ask you this, because I know we're short for time here soon. Let's say Trump gets into office and he hires you as national security advisor again. How would you end the wars in Ukraine and in Israel?
Yeah. So the first thing is you've got to know what your abilities are as a nation. In our case, with the right leadership and the right positions, particularly financially and economically, because we can shut down a lot of things. The United States of America is so powerful economically if we have the right leaders in place.
Yeah.
And so that's number one. Number two is the world of information. So right now we're really not getting any truth out of our government. None. I hate to say it like that, but we're not getting anything. So immediately we have got to inform the American people exactly what is happening.
Here it is, by the way, guys. We're going to share the Citizens Defending Freedom.
Citizens Defending Freedom. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there you go. Yep, beautiful. So, and then the next thing is you got to, and this is where the president,
so
the United
transparency,
using
our economic might.
The economic strength and power that we do still have when it's used properly, and gathering the resources. So bringing the people that are on our side right now, like NATO, right? And the partners, right? So to get them immediately and say, look, guys and gals, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to kowtow to NATO as they want to continue to expand into the Russian frontier. And I'm not pro-Putin. I mean, I've been called every name in the book, folks, but this is about stopping the killing. So Zelensky, I look at Zelensky and I'm like, are you serious? Putin is very shrewd. So you got to be able to have a relationship. We know that Biden has not spoken to Putin in over 2 years.
Crazy.
So that's got to be like, that kind of a phone call has to happen immediately. The phone calls from the President of the United States, call this guy Khomeini, right? And tell him, you don't stop firing missiles, you don't pull these guys back, you're not going to see any peace. I mean, we have to sort of throw some cards down on the table that stick, if you will, right before the carrot, that says we are willing to use this stick in such a powerful way that if you don't come to this table and you don't sit here and negotiate what we think we need to do, then here's the consequence, because we cannot have this craziness. So there's a strength that comes with leadership, and it comes with demonstrated courage. It comes with demonstrated, calculation. So it's not like you're just going like they're going to blame, the media will blame, this corporate media in this country will blame Trump and say he's a crazy man. He's going to start World War III. Trump never got us involved in any wars at all. None. Yeah. None. And here we are on the brink potentially of nuclear war in Eastern Europe. And I hate to say it like that, but that's how dangerous. So it's, number one really is
you're dragging them both to the table, Zelensky and Putin, basically.
And you know what? And bringing people like the Chinese premier, prime minister, all of these nation states.
Okay.
So the Security Council of the United Nations. I'm not a big fan of the United Nations, but it is a place to gather for now. So the Security Council, and you bring these others together and you sit them there. The United States of America can do that when they have somebody who actually has all their faculties. We don't have a president right now that has all their faculties. I was not kidding about Uncle Joe 25 minutes ago or so.
He's in bed right now, probably.
Yeah, he probably is. He's getting close. Oh, it's actually, it's after 4, so he's in bed. And then Harris. God help us. I've been on 6 continents in my military career, blessed, and to have done the things that I did. And
this is the website that you guys can donate to, by the way, on the screen. So, guys, go show some love over there. Help, some
if you want to help,
relief.
Honestly, $10, $5, $100, and if you can't, pray for these people, because I was briefed this morning, and they just found a child wandering around in one of the small enclaves up there, half naked, freezing, but survived. So
awful.
So
But sorry, you were talking about bringing these people together.
Yeah, so the big question is, can we end these things? Yes, we can. But it takes the United States of America with the right leader to sit there. And part of it is this is the strength, one of the strengths of Trump.
Would you say that we need to allow Russia to keep that 20% that they've already taken at this point?
I think and the people in those Donbasses, they call them provinces, states, if you will. I actually think that those people have to be given a choice to throw it on the table and vote.
Okay.
Throw it on the table and vote. And
do you want to stay with Russia or not?
Yeah, and I believe because we've already seen one of these occurrences take place during the time that Biden's been in office, where they did that, and they actually voted, because most of those people are Russians.
They are.
When they split up of Ukraine and the Warsaw Pact. So that's, to me, would be on the table for them, right? And I actually believe that if it was presented correctly and done transparently, I actually think that Putin would go, okay. And I think he would, because I don't think that he fears what those people want. And actually,
most of them are probably going to want to be with Russia anyway.
Yeah, because that's their native. It's not just their native tongue; it's their native culture. So, a lot of this, and we could do 2 more hours of nothing but the Budapest Accords in 1994, which we had 4 leaders sit at that table, and one of them was Gorbachev, Bush, Mitterrand, and Thatcher. Okay, it's at Budapest Accords of 1994. They basically, during those things, it was like an agreement that we all shook hands and said, no more like shift of NATO up against the Russian frontier. Okay, and we have doubled down on that. We screwed, so it's like you got to have. We
expanded when we promised we wouldn't, right?
So last point on this, because people will go freak out. Well, he met with Putin. Watch the movie. You watch the movie about what my brother Jack said, and he's right. So, what I am is I'm all about peace and trying to figure out how to get out of this mess that we're in. What we need right now in this country is we need a really, really strong leader. The one funny thing about Trump And I could be his worst nightmare, actually, because I could have turned on him, but I didn't because there was nothing there. It was
Unlike Mike Pence, that's
yeah, Mike Pence is sorry. But one of the things about Trump, in one of his leadership traits, and this is kind of, if you really understand the art of the deal, this is a guy that uses uncertainty to his advantage, okay? Mm-hmm. So he makes action, reaction, counteraction, right? So he makes the other side of the line uncertain about what it's going to do. So they have to have all kinds of options, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to, the middle linebacker, the deep safety, he's got to be really good, best in the league. And if you're going to deal with a guy like Trump, because he's looking this way, he's looking right. He looks left, and the guy's playing that, right? And all of a sudden he looks left and he hesitates for that 1 second, and the guy turns that way and he goes back deep to the right. Mm-hmm. And boom, you have a long bomb, touchdown. Trump has that level of uncertainty in his character. And the media, the socialist, communist, Marxist left, they don't like that about him because they can't figure out.
Can't predict.
They can't predict.
Yeah, he's unpredictable.
And that's not a bad thing in warfare. So
interesting. I know you have to get going here. Yeah. So, guys, we'll probably have to do a part 2 on this because I wanted to talk about the Obama administration, stuff like that, but we ran out of time. So, General Flynn, can you tell the people where they can find you? And we'll definitely do a part 2.
Yeah. So first, I so appreciate Myron, you and the team, Chris and Mo. I would love them to watch the movie Flynn, Deliver the Truth, whatever the cost. You can get it on YouTube, stream it. I think it's $3.99, if I'm not mistaken, maybe $4.99, but stream it. Get a group together. Believe me, you'll be blown away. People will be blown away when you watch it. You can also go to flynnmovie.com. We've got specials running right now for, the elections, Thanksgiving, Christmas. If you buy one DVD, you get a second one for free. And on that DVD there's 3 extra hours of uncut footage. It's just blow you away. And there's also a streaming chit that comes in it. So that's a deal. People can also follow me at generalflynn.com, generalflynn.com. I do at least one weekly newsletter every week, and you can get it for free. I got all my back, every other thing I've ever written is on there, generalflynn.com. And I just appreciate the American people's support. I would not be able to sit here today with you, Myron, unless the American people came to my support. I'd been destroyed. So
we got your back, man. You're a true patriot, awesome. And we're going to stand by you. Guys, here's General Flynn. Please go support him. Go get the documentary. It's on YouTube. I got it myself. I watched it before the podcast. I actually watched it, so when I bring it back the second time, you guys are going to understand what we're going to talk about when we talk about the Obamas and the people that betrayed them and, the sickness of the deep state. But, guys, go check them out. We'll catch you guys back here with Brandon Carter in a few hours. Love you guys. Peace.